Well, I have a missing daughter. Okay. How old is she? She's 8. When's the last time you saw her? Oh, about 3. She told me she was going over here. There's one girl to play and she hasn't been home, and I went looking all over. I told you it was an accident. I know it was. Accidents happen. I went to the church. I was there. And when I came outside, I looked at its suitcase. I went to take it out and it was heavy. She was in there. She wasn't breathing. The search for a missing child has turned into a hunt for a murderer. The remains of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu were discovered concealed a short distance from her community. It began with a child racing out of her home on a Friday afternoon, vibrant and full of life. She wore her favorite Hello Kitty shirt, a final wave to her mother, a skip across the pavement, and then silence. No cries for help, no signs of struggle, no witnesses remained. One moment she existed, the next she was a ghost. The culprit was no stranger, but a guest invited into the family's sanctuary, someone granted their absolute trust. California has seen many horrors, but few cases resonate with the chilling intimacy of this particular tragedy. For those unfamiliar with the full sequence of events, the gravity of this story demands your focus. Tracy, California, a town rarely mentioned in the national press. Nestled in the Central Valley, it serves as a quiet buffer between two contrasting worlds. Tranquil suburban streets define one border, while the relentless momentum of the San Francisco Bay Area pulses on the other. Daily, thousands navigate the Altamont Pass, watching white turbines churn against the hills while their hometown remains frozen in time. Tracy's identity was forged by the railroad, a waypoint for travelers, a place defined by people merely passing through. Over decades, many travelers stopped moving. They sought the stillness. They craved the security. For most residents, the predictable nature of life was its greatest virtue. This was the quiet environment that 8-year-old Sandra Cantu called home. A second-grade student, she lived at the Orchard Estates mobile home park with her mother Maria and 3 older siblings, Miranda, Simone, and Thomas. Years had passed since her parents' divorce. Her father, Daniel, lived at a distance, yet the children maintained a daily dialogue with him. That bond was unbreakable. Those who knew Sandra often struggled to find words, but one descriptor surfaced repeatedly: alive. The term transcended biological function. It defined her very essence in every possible way. Thomas recalled her perpetual motion. She was a fixture in her mother's kitchen and a constant helper in her grandparents' garden. Gymnastics and dance filled her schedule. Most afternoons involved a familiar ritual: knocking on neighbors' doors, searching for a playmate. If the neighborhood was quiet, she possessed the rare ability to find genuine joy in her own company. She didn't harbor bitterness or sulk. She recovered quickly from setbacks. Unlike many of her peers, Sandra viewed school as a privilege. She anticipated the morning and returned home each afternoon, eager to recount every single detail of her day to her family. To grasp the horror that followed, one must look closely at the map of this specific community. The reach of this tragedy extends far beyond the borders of California, leaving a lasting impact on all who hear it. Every aspect of this account has been scrutinized to provide clarity and honor the memory of the victim. Returning to the events in Tracy, it was a standard Friday, a routine day at school. Shortly after 2 in the afternoon, Sandra arrived home, dropped her gear, and immediately sought the outdoors. Her brother had also returned, but Sandra had no intention of staying inside. Orchard Estates was a confined community of approximately 100 residents. It sat adjacent to a public park where children played constantly. Maria felt no cause for alarm. The rule was simple: return when dinner was called. Sandra had never failed to comply with that expectation. Sandra put on her favorite Hello Kitty top and black leggings, embraced her mother briefly, and vanished into the afternoon. Time passed. As evening approached, Maria sent Thomas to collect the children. Miranda returned promptly. Sandra did not. Thomas spent 20 minutes scouring the area without success. Maria and Simone took to the car, canvassing the streets and questioning neighbors. No one had seen her for hours. At 7:30 that night, Maria placed a call to 911. Sandra Cantu was now a missing person. Given her age, the authorities bypassed standard waiting protocols. Well, I have a missing daughter. Okay. How old is she? She's 8. What's the last time on your daughter? I was about 10. She told me she was going over to this one girl to play, and she hasn't been home, and I went looking all over. Investigators mobilized instantly. Canine units arrived, using Sandra's clothes to isolate her scent. They tracked her through the park and toward the perimeter. The dogs followed the trail toward a primary thoroughfare, then stopped abruptly. The scent simply vanished. No direction, no progression, total silence. As police began canvassing the mobile home park, a subtle, unsettling pattern began to emerge. Orchard Estates housed a disproportionate number of residents with violent criminal backgrounds for such a modest community. Predators lived mere feet from the pathways where young Sandra played every afternoon. The investigation focused on a local ice cream truck driver who frequently patrolled the immediate vicinity. Neighbors reported troubling behavior toward children. He had been forcibly driven away by residents on several occasions. Suspicion is not evidence, yet it cannot be ignored. Then, the grandfather Joe provided a vital piece of information. Following a previous incident, he had installed a surveillance system on the family property. The recording verified the mother's timeline. Sandra was seen exiting the residence, moving toward the play area. Subsequent frames showed her skipping, relaxed, and seemingly safe. She appeared as any child would, heading toward a family meal. She did not ascend the steps to her own home. Instead, she turned toward the park exit. Then, she vanished from the camera's view. This single movement recalibrated the entire search. Sandra was strictly forbidden from leaving the mobile home park without adult supervision. Her compliance was well documented by those who knew her. Her calm, unhesitating departure suggested a specific destination or person. An external force had secured her attention. It was someone she recognized, someone who projected safety. Detectives simultaneously scrutinized her father, Daniel. He had been estranged from Sandra for a time, following bitter legal and financial conflicts with Maria. Maria remained firm. She insisted Daniel was not involved in their daughter's disappearance. The objective evidence supported her intuition. Daniel resided far from Tracy. Employment records confirmed he was at his place of work throughout the entire weekend. He was cleared. By the 48-hour mark, the tip line had received over 700 individual reports. Sightings of children matching Sandra's description surfaced across California. The authorities remained transparent about the grim reality. Statistically, the child was likely still within the city limits of Tracy. However, every lead from Nevada to Southern California was pursued with absolute rigor. Time was the enemy. Recognizing the need for elite resources, local police requested the activation of CARD. The Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team is a specialized FBI unit designed for high-stakes disappearances. Special Agent Joseph Bryan took command. His assessment was blunt. As the hours passed, the probability of a safe recovery diminished. History suggests that cases of this nature rarely conclude with a joyful reunion. Yet, the search continued under the thin hope that Sandra remained alive. Then, the atmosphere shifted. The search for the 8-year-old Tracy resident enters another morning. Authorities state Sandra Cantu was last seen walking away from Orchard Estates. Reporter Ken Shams is live on the scene. Good morning. I am standing outside the Orchard Estates mobile home park. Tracy police are currently intercepting and interviewing every driver attempting to leave the complex this morning. This tactical screening is just one facet of the active police investigation. Parallel to the official effort, a massive civilian search continues to unfold. Quote, "And I wish we didn't have to be here. And I wish she was at home with her family." End quote. Quote, "And I hope if somebody has her, They bring her home. She needs to be home with her family and her friends and all these people that care because we all care. End quote. Quote, "That's why we're all here." End quote. This sentiment represents one of the approximately 300 volunteers who assisted over the weekend. Sandra Cantu is an 8-year-old Hispanic female, 4 feet tall, weighing 45 pounds, with brown hair and eyes. Surveillance footage confirms she left the park around 4 p.m., briefly returned, and then departed a second time. One question remains: where did that final walk lead her, and where is she now? The investigation remains active and ongoing. Anyone with information is urged to contact the Tracy police. Over 200 officers from various agencies are now deployed. This represents only the second mobilization of this magnitude in the history of Northern California. The pressure was so intense that the police chief eventually had to command her staff to stand down and sleep. They were exhausted, haunted by the fear that a single minute of rest might cost them the critical clue. The breakthrough was missing, but it was looming. Time moved slowly. The neighborhood held a vigil under the glow of candles. A thick silence replaced all possible speech. Thomas joined the crowd, but even through the collective pleas for a miracle, he felt a cold certainty rising from within. No prayer would alter the truth. Something catastrophic had befallen his younger sister. The full weight of that reality was still hidden. At 8:30 that evening, a sudden development pulled the detectives away from the mourning crowd. A woman named Melissa rushed toward the patrol cars. She was hyperventilating. Panic was etched on her face. Living a few units away from the family, she claimed to have found a written message near a mailbox. According to her, she dropped the paper the moment she read it and ran for help. The message stated, "Canoe placed inside a stolen suitcase thrown in water on BTI Road and Whitehall Road." Silence followed. The phrasing was unsettling. The orthographic errors felt artificial. It was as if someone were imitating a lack of education. The timing was suspect. High winds were tearing through the park while the community was preoccupied with the vigil. Police had been constant in their patrols. The idea that someone could plant a note at that specific location seemed impossible. In that narrow window of time, the discovery felt manufactured, staged. However, because the note named a physical site, the investigation had to pivot. Statements were required. Melissa was brought in for an interrogation conducted by FBI agents. She was a neighbor and a Sunday school teacher. Her grandfather was the local pastor. Her past was marked by a divorce and recent romantic instability. She lived with her elders and her 5-year-old child. Sandra and her siblings were known to visit Melissa's home frequently. They often played with her young daughter. The Cantu family viewed her as a trusted figure in their circle. Under questioning, she claimed the find was accidental. No suspicious persons were seen in the vicinity. She gave the officers permission to inspect her personal vehicle. In the glove box, they discovered a small yellow pad. Several words had been written and then violently crossed out. The item was flagged for forensics. Melissa was released while the focus shifted to the physical evidence of the note. She provided a list of individuals in the mobile home park she believed posed a threat. One man had a history of contact with minors. Another had been observed in compromising situations. She implicated a father and son, alleging they possessed unauthorized photographs of local minors on their mobile devices, including Sandra. There was no legitimate familial link to justify the images. Every individual named was brought in. Some agreed to undergo polygraph examinations. The results were muddy. Without forensic links, the investigation stalled. Every person remained under a cloud of suspicion. Investigators found themselves circling back to Melissa. Her detailed knowledge of her neighbors was suspiciously thorough. Other residents, however, described a different woman. They spoke of a person desperate for relevance, someone who would manipulate a situation to ensure she was the protagonist. Detectives had to decide which version was real, a helpful witness or a woman performing a scripted role. Background checks provided a clearer lens. A pattern of behavior began to emerge from the records. Melissa had a documented history of emotional instability and multiple instances of clinical oversight. There were prior legal complications involving property-related crimes. Her name had appeared in previous vandalism cases. In each instance, she moved cities before a resolution was reached. In 2003, she declared bankruptcy. She had spent years attempting to settle massive financial liabilities. When police attempted a follow-up, they found she had admitted herself to a psychiatric ward following a breakdown. She described it as a total loss of self-control. Once her condition improved, she ended all cooperation with the law. Meanwhile, search teams arrived at the coordinates mentioned in the anonymous note. The location was an irrigation reservoir where local drainage channels met. The water was opaque and deep. Divers faced a total lack of visibility. The search was a near impossibility. The site was placed under constant guard. It had been 10 days since the child went missing. One morning, the maintenance process began as workers lowered the basin for routine drainage. The receding water revealed a grim discovery. A dark suitcase sat on the muddy bank, sealed and silent. Detectives opened it to find the remains of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu. She was still in the clothes she wore that final afternoon, her black leggings and a Hello Kitty top. Post-mortem exams confirmed the end came quickly after she vanished from the camera's view. A foreign substance was present in her system. At the outset, no DNA evidence linked a specific suspect to the crime scene. The window of time was narrow. Whatever occurred had reached its conclusion within hours of her leaving home. This was the same social child who would visit every neighbor asking for a playmate, the same little girl the community treated as family. She was gone. 10 days of desperate hope collapsed into a heavy, suffocating grief. With the pathology report complete, the task of profiling a killer began in earnest. Early theories pointed toward an adult Caucasian male, between 25 and 40 years old, with a violent history, a familiar face, someone the child would trust, most likely an Orchard Estates resident or a frequent visitor. Every man fitting that description was interrogated. Their stories checked out. Investigators shifted focus, canvassing the area surrounding the irrigation pond. A single witness statement changed the trajectory of the hunt. A resident recalled a dark purple, two-tone vehicle idling near the water on the Friday Sandra disappeared. It was out of place. No one from the neighborhood recognized the SUV. The location was nonsensical. A muddy, desolate patch of road where no one ever parked. When the witness approached the empty vehicle, a woman suddenly emerged from the tree line. She offered a brief, vague excuse regarding personal matters before fleeing the scene at high speed. Her description matched Melissa perfectly. Footage confirmed it was her. Same woman, same car. Melissa was no longer just a witness. She was now the primary person of interest. Everything she had said was put under the microscope. From the moment she approached police at the vigil, her narrative began to unravel. Melissa maintained her innocence. She insisted she was merely a bystander who found a disturbing note. When grilled about the 4 o'clock hour on the day of the disappearance, the exact time Sandra vanished, Melissa claimed she was busy at her grandfather's church. She said nothing was amiss. Then, her phone records arrived. The logs revealed a call to police that afternoon. It wasn't about a missing child. Melissa had reported a stolen suitcase. She also sent a text to Maria, instructing her to tell police that something was taken from her at 4 p.m., transitioning to her words, "I don't know if it means anything or even matters. It was everything." The black Eddie Bauer suitcase pulled from the silt, the one containing Sandra's body, was an identical match to the one Melissa claimed was stolen. Then there was the discovery of the note near the mailboxes. It didn't just mention a bag. It explicitly used the phrase "stolen suitcase." To believe her, one had to believe a stranger entered her yard, stole her luggage, used it for a heinous crime, and moved it in daylight without being seen, only for Melissa out of everyone to be the one who found the incriminating message left behind. Investigators were finished with her stories. They placed her phone under direct surveillance. 2 days after her hospital stay, a recorded conversation sparked new alarm. Melissa invited Sandra's older sister, Miranda, to sleep over. Miranda accepted. The next morning, Miranda told her mother that the atmosphere was wrong. Melissa never spoke of the victim. She focused entirely on the mechanics of the police work, what they knew, what they had found. Miranda left with a deep sense of dread. The evidence was mounting, but it was still indirect. Then, a new witness stepped forward. Authorities learned that shortly before Sandra vanished, Melissa had removed a neighborhood child and taken her to a park for several hours. This occurred without the parents' consent. Upon the child's return, her family immediately recognized a haunting change in her demeanor. She lacked the strength to stand. Her articulation was gone. They rushed her to a medical facility for an emergency assessment. Toxicology screening identified a foreign chemical in her system. It was the same classification of substance later discovered in Sandra's case. Melissa denied any part in the incident. No formal charges were filed at that time. Yet a disturbing behavioral pattern was starting to emerge. Under the weight of mounting suspicion, Melissa contacted a member of the press. She hoped to solidify her narrative and publicly distance herself from the active homicide investigation. The maneuver backfired. Instead of providing an alibi, the public statement served only to accelerate the inevitable conclusion. She's our overarch so much because Sandra was my daughter's best friend and came over here almost every day to play with my daughter. And another thing is the suitcase. That was my suitcase. It was stolen out from the front of my house in order to make a report. I had to go online and make a report, and I do not have access to the internet. So, do you believe your missing suitcase was the same suitcase that Sandra was found in? I do not know. From what I can see on PC, it does not look like my suitcase. The police have not any information as to whether or not it is my suitcase. There was a situation where you and your daughter were out with another kid, and then what happened there? There was someone accused you of something. Oh, I had taken my daughter and one of her friends to the park, which I had done for the 3rd time that week. The mother was, I guess, at work, and the grandmother had told the little girl that she could go to work, which she does all the time, and when the mother came home, she didn't know where she was. I gathered my phone number, my cell phone number, and she said if anything to happen, everything was fine. I brought her back. Police were called out at the time, and I was then called by my grandparents. Her mother did not know that she was missing. That she was with me. Transitioning from the interview, investigators executed search warrants on Melissa's mobile home and her grandfather's place of worship. The evidence recovered from the trailer effectively ended all speculation. A notebook. Forensic analysis confirmed the handwriting inside matched the ransom note Melissa claimed to have discovered near the mailboxes. Experts were certain the script, the pen pressure, and the linguistic style were all identical. There was no longer a basis for debate. A post-it note previously seized from her glove compartment had also been fully processed by this point. It bore the names BTI Road and Whitehall Road, along with the word water. These were the exact details found in the original note. Detectives also recovered a prescribed medication in Melissa's name. The drug belonged to the same category as the substance identified during Sandra's autopsy. The inspection of the church provided the final, damning components of the case. Police found a common household tool with a damaged handle. It carried forensic traces that were directly linked to Sandra. A length of cord was missing from a window blind. Federal analysts confirmed the material was a perfect match for the cord used to secure the suitcase in the pond. The evidence was no longer open to interpretation. The picture was complete. Melissa was brought in for a final interrogation. Her story remained unchanged. She sat before the detectives, repeating the same narrative she had maintained since the beginning. This time, however, the investigators presented the full weight of their findings. They laid out the evidence systematically, piece by piece. When the final item was revealed, Melissa's composure finally collapsed. Between 5:30 and 5:40, 2 people saw your car stopped on Whitehall Road. They saw you come from out of the bushes on Whitehall Road and someone asked you what. But I was okay. And I said I was going to the room. What were you doing, Alyssa? Through her sobs, she said, "It was an accident. I told you it was an accident. I know it was accidents happen. Kill her. I was there. And when I came outside, I L my staircase. I went to take it out and it was heavy. She was in there. She wasn't breathing or anything. What did she look like? She looked pale. I thought that I killed her." "Huh?" "I thought that she was dead, and I panicked. So, what happened? I tried to wake her up, and she wouldn't wake up. But I didn't know what else to do." What followed was a narrative that detectives immediately recognized as a fabrication disguised as a confession. The suspect maintained that the girl noticed her by the vehicle and simply walked over to offer a greeting. She alleged the child discovered a suitcase in the rear and, in a moment of play, crawled inside without being seen. According to her, the child was found lifeless within the luggage only after arriving at the local chapel. Panic ensued. Attempts to help failed. Concealment became the choice. Detectives remained silent, letting the fiction unfold. With every retelling, the architecture of the lie grew more cumbersome. Details shifted. Inconsistencies multiplied, clashing with the cold reality of the forensic evidence. The autopsy results were definitive. This death was no accident. Toxicological reports and the specifics of the recovery site contradicted the story being told. When her words finally ran dry, the arrest was made. Formal charges were filed for the abduction and murder of the child. Prosecutors later added counts involving a separate incident with another minor from the neighborhood. A previous case involving a 37-year-old former associate was also brought to light. One fact remained central to the investigation. The child possessed absolute trust in the woman. She would have approached that car without a second thought. Police believe a simple request was all that was required. It is suspected she was lured under the guise of assisting with preparations for a church event. The response was immediate and unsuspecting. Investigators believe she was taken indoors and incapacitated with a substance before the fatal conclusion occurred. While the town organized searches, distributed flyers, and held vigils, a different scene was unfolding. The suspect was busy reporting a stolen bag, messaging the mother, and fabricating evidence. She maintained the mask of a helpful neighbor, hiding her involvement behind a facade of concern. A plea of not guilty was initially entered. The defense focused on a history of psychological trauma. They argued that long-standing mental health issues, born of past suffering, had compromised her capacity for judgment. Legal counsel highlighted a specific, traumatic event from when she was 19. This incident, they claimed, went untreated and quietly dictated her later actions. While she was held in the county jail, the defendant exhibited signs of instability and was placed under suicide watch. Her family claimed total ignorance of her potential for violence. To them, there had been no indications of the darkness within. Neighbors recalled a gentle mother and a friendly, approachable figure in their social circle. During the hearing, the defendant's mother addressed the victim's family. She spoke of a shared maternal sorrow. She acknowledged that true justice, returning a life taken, was beyond her power. Speaking to the court, the defendant stated, "It is not enough that I say I'm sorry, but that is all I can do. From the day Sandra has died, I've had to live with the consequence of what I've done. For the rest of my life, I'm going to have to live with his snorts feelings." Laughter. I loved Sandra a great deal. She was sweet, and as a little girl who did not deserve to have such a short life. I alone are responsible for Sandra's death. I would like to apologize directly to you, Maria, for all of the pain that I've caused. I should not have taken Sandra from you. And I want you to know that she did not suffer, and I did not sexually molest your daughter. I would also like to apologize to my own daughter whom I have lost. I hope that someday you will forgive me. I love you a great deal, and I hope to see you again someday soon. I owe an apology to the people of Tracy and the police officers who spent so much time looking for Sandra. I know in my heart that God has forgiven me, and I know my family has forgiven me, Snorts. And I'm asking you, Maria, for your forgiveness. I can't imagine forgiving somebody who would harm my own daughter, but I hope that someday you can forgive me. Maria, I wish I could give you an explanation for what happened. I owe you an explanation, but I still cannot understand why I did what I did. Every day I try to discover my motivation, but I still do not have an answer. This is a question I will struggle with for the rest of my life, and I hope that this apology will help you in some way by accepting responsibility for what I have done. Snorts, I hope that I can give you some peace. Faced with the gravity of the state's case, the defendant ultimately withdrew her initial plea, guilty. She confessed to the primary counts, finally owning the fate she dealt to young Sandra. A plea deal saw secondary charges dismissed. Capital punishment was removed from consideration. Prosecutors addressed the bench. They detailed the forensic evidence and the timeline of a nightmare. It was, in their professional estimation, one of the most devastating atrocities they had ever navigated. Daniel, the victim's father, rose. He turned his gaze toward Melissa to deliver a final word. His words carried a weight no script could mimic. They emerged from a depth of grief reserved only for a parent who has buried a child, a place born from profound loss. Transitioning to his statement, "Scream yet, and nothing changes, and nothing's going to change the fact whether I cry." Snorts. Ain't nothing you do in life ever going to change anything. The court interjected, "Mr. Koo, I need you to address your comment to me," he concluded. "She changed the lives of a lot of people. All I can say right now is repent, and think about what you've done." The ruling was final. Melissa was sentenced to life in a state facility without any hope of parole, no reprieve, no future release. The rest of her days will be spent behind stone walls. Still, the motive remains obscured. She has withheld the one thing the family craves, the absolute truth of what happened that night. The district attorney highlighted a disturbing history. Detectives cataloged approximately 20 prior instances where she displayed volatile, attention-hungry behavior. To investigators, this psychological compulsion was the unifying thread, connecting the initial vigil to the cryptic notes and the media appearances. A pathological need to be the protagonist of the tragedy fueled her, even as the investigation tightened its grip. That specific Friday, Sandra stepped out of her home after a rare, joyous day at school. She was looking forward to the weekend, to playing with friends. She had no premonition of the predator waiting nearby. The reality of what occurred within those church walls at the hands of a woman the family trusted is a horror that grows heavier with time. It only becomes more unbearable. In Tracy, a tribute stands near her school. A tree with pink blossoms marks her memory. They built a playhouse called Sandra's Cottage. Her grandfather envisioned a sanctuary she would have cherished, a place where she could have simply played with her siblings. It was designed for children to gather and find joy. To the neighbors, she wasn't just a neighbor, she was the community's own daughter. Everyone protected her. Her absence now serves as a cold, permanent marker of how quickly safety can vanish. Today marks what would have been murder victim Sandra Cantu's 9th birthday. Loved ones assembled to commemorate a life cut short and to recognize those who fought to find her. A correspondent reports from Tracy on this somber anniversary. A birthday balloon and flowers rest at the base of a tree dedicated to Sandra's memory. Those present described the service as a celebration of her short life. The music was a fitting tribute, a beautiful song for a mother who has relied on her community to endure the darkness. Yeah, there's a lot more people than what I thought. Maria Chavez, mother of 8-year-old Sandra, was moved by the gathering. She stood surrounded by friends and strangers on what would have been the 9th birthday of the girl known as Tracy's Angel. Many chose to focus on light rather than the shadow of the past. Absolutely. It's to go beyond the negativity that has happened, and to keep the positive. Sandra's memory remains a source of strength for this town. Every shared story brought both tears and smiles. Family members found comfort in the community's embrace and the belief that Sandra is finally at peace. She was happy. She loved life. An investigator assigned to the file offered a grim summary. Life is priceless. That little girl was only 8 years old, and that was it. Thomas, her brother, described the hollow space left behind. She took away one of the biggest parts of our lives. The joy of watching someone grow, of seeing who they could have become. Years may pass, dulling the immediate agony. Yet some shadows are permanent. Such persistence of memory defines our species. If this case demands your reflection, provide your thoughts. Pass this account to those who value the truth. If you seek further investigations into the darkness, the lesson of Sandra Cantu, guarding the light of the human condition, continues. The tragic story of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu is a harrowing reminder that the greatest threats sometimes wear the most familiar faces. In a community built on the predictable nature of life and absolute trust, a predator hid behind the mask of a Sunday school teacher and a helpful neighbor. Sandra, described as vibrant and full of life, was lured not by a stranger in the shadows, but by someone she considered a sanctuary, someone she would have approached without a second thought. This case teaches us a devastating educational truth. Vigilance must transcend our comfort zones. We often teach children to fear stranger danger. Yet Sandra's life was taken by the very person who sat at her family's table. It serves as a somber propaganda for protection, urging parents and communities to look beyond outward roles of trusted figures and pay attention to subtle behavioral red flags and psychological instability. Sandra's absence is a cold, permanent marker that safety can vanish in an instant. We must honor her memory by fostering a culture where absolute trust is never a replacement for unwavering oversight. Let her pink blossoms and Tracy remind us, we are the keepers of our children's light, and we must never let the darkness get close enough to extinguish it.